My grandkids ignored me until they needed my money, so I made them earn every penny. You know, they say blood is thicker than water, but I'm here to tell you that money can make even the thickest blood run pretty thin. My name is Margaret, and at 78 years old, I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what my own grandchildren would put me through. If you've ever felt forgotten by the people you love most, or if you've wondered whether your family only calls when they need something, then you need to hear this story. Because what I did to teach my grandkids a lesson about respect and family changed everything, and I guarantee you won't see the ending coming. It started innocently enough, the way these things always do. After my husband Harold passed away 3 years ago, I found myself rattling around in this big old house we'd built together 45 years ago. The silence was deafening. Harold and we'd raised 3 beautiful children, and they'd given us 7 grandchildren ranging from 16 to 28 years old. I thought, surely, with all these family members, I wouldn't be lonely. Surely someone would want to spend time with Grandma Margaret, right? Boy, was I wrong. The first few months after Harold's funeral, I kept expecting the phone to ring. I'd make extra portions of my famous apple pie, thinking maybe little Emma or teenage Jake would stop by like they used to when Harold was alive. I'd sit by the window, watching for cars that never came. I'd check my phone constantly, wondering if maybe I'd missed a call or a text. But weeks turned into months, and the only calls I got were from telemarketers and the occasional doctor's office reminder. Don't get me wrong, my adult children called, but it was always rushed, always distracted. Hi, Mom, just checking in, gotta run to soccer practice. Or, hey, Mom, super busy with work, can I call you back? Except they never did call back. And the grandkids? They might as well have vanished into thin air. No visits, no calls, not even a text message on my birthday. I started to wonder if I'd become invisible. I tried everything I could think of. I joined Facebook, thinking maybe I could connect with them there. I learned how to post pictures and leave comments on their photos, but it was like shouting into the void. They'd post about their lives, their friends, their achievements, but when Grandma Margaret left a heart emoji or wrote "So proud of you, sweetheart," it was like I didn't exist. They never responded, never acknowledged me. I watched their lives unfold through tiny squares on a computer screen, feeling more like a stranger than their grandmother. The loneliness was crushing. I'd wake up some mornings and realize I hadn't spoken to another human being in 3 days. I started talking to Harold's picture, having full conversations with him about what I should make for dinner or whether I should plant roses or tulips in the front garden. I knew it wasn't healthy, but it was better than the alternative of complete silence. Then something interesting happened. I was at the bank one day, making my weekly deposit of Harold's pension and Social Security, when the teller, a sweet young man named David, mentioned something that got my attention. He said, "Mrs. Peterson, I don't mean to pry, but you've got quite a substantial amount building up in your accounts. Have you thought about investment opportunities or maybe helping family members with college or down payments?" That's when it hit me. Harold had been incredibly smart with money. He'd invested in real estate back in the 70s and 80s. He'd bought stocks that seemed risky at the time, but paid off beautifully. And he'd been putting money away in various accounts for decades. I'd never paid much attention to the finances. That was Harold's department. But now, looking at the numbers on the bank statement, I realized I was sitting on almost $2 million. $2 million. At 78 years old, with no one to talk to and no one who seemed to care whether I lived or died. It was almost funny, in a tragic sort of way. Here I was, wealthy enough to change multiple lives, and I couldn't even get a phone call from my own flesh and blood. But then, as if the universe had a sense of humor, my phone started ringing. First, it was my grandson Tyler, the 26-year-old who was trying to start his own business. "Grandma Margaret, I've been thinking about you so much lately. How are you doing? I miss you." The sudden warmth in his voice was jarring after months of silence. We chatted for a few minutes about nothing in particular, and then he got to the point. "So, Grandma, I'm wondering if you might be able to help me out with a little loan. Just $15,000 to get my landscaping business off the ground. I'll pay you back with interest, I promise." A loan. After 8 months of radio silence, my grandson calls me asking for $15,000. Before I could even process this conversation fully, My phone rang again the next day. This time it was Emma, my 22-year-old granddaughter who was finishing college. "Grandma, oh my gosh, I feel so terrible that we haven't talked in forever. I've been so busy with school and work, but you've been on my mind constantly." Then came the ask. "I was wondering, and please don't feel pressured, but my student loans are just crushing me. If there's any way you could help me pay them off, maybe like $25,000, it would literally change my life. I'd be so, so grateful." Then Jake, my 18-year-old grandson, called. He needed help with a car, $12,000 for a reliable vehicle to get to his new job. My granddaughter Sarah wanted help with a down payment on an apartment, $30,000. Another grandson, Michael, needed money for trade school, $18,000. Within 2 weeks, I'd gotten calls from 6 of my 7 grandchildren, all suddenly interested in having a relationship with dear old Grandma Margaret. If you've been through something similar, let me know in the comments. Have your family members ever disappeared until they needed something from you? Because I'm telling you, it cuts deep, deeper than I ever expected. Now, I could have been bitter. I could have told them all to take a hike. But you know what? I'm not that kind of person. Instead, I got curious. I started wondering, what if I used this opportunity to actually build the relationships I'd been craving? What if I could teach them something about family, about respect, about earning what you receive in life? That's when I came up with my plan. I called each grandchild back and told them I'd be happy to help them, but I had some conditions. I explained that I was lonely, that I'd felt forgotten, and that if they wanted my financial help, they'd need to invest in a relationship with me first. I wasn't going to just hand over money to strangers who happened to share my DNA. Here's what I told them. For every $1,000 they wanted, they needed to spend 1 hour of quality time with me. Not just sitting in the same room scrolling through their phones, but actual conversation, actual engagement. We could cook together, work in the garden, look through old photo albums, play cards, take walks, whatever they wanted. But it had to be real time, focused time, where I was the priority. The reactions were interesting. A couple of them tried to negotiate. "Grandma, what if I call you for an hour instead?" "No." "What if I bring my girlfriend and we all hang out together?" "No." "What if we watch a movie? That counts as spending time together, right?" "No." I was very clear about what I meant by quality time. Tyler, the one who needed $15,000 for his business, was the first to take me up on it. He came over on a Saturday morning, clearly expecting to power through 15 hours of grandma time in one weekend and be done with it. But something magical happened during those first few hours. We were making Harold's famous chocolate chip pancakes together, and Tyler started talking about his business dreams, his fears about failure, his struggles with self-confidence. I shared stories about Harold and me starting from nothing, about the failures we'd experienced before we found success. By hour 3, Tyler wasn't watching the clock anymore. He was genuinely engaged, asking me questions about Harold, about our early marriage, about how we'd built our life together. He stayed for 8 hours that first day, and when he left, he hugged me tighter than he'd hugged me since he was a little boy. "Grandma," he said, "I had no idea you were so interesting. I had no idea Grandpa had done all those things." Emma was tougher. She came over with an attitude, clearly resentful about having to pay for the money with her time. She sat at my kitchen table with her arms crossed, checking her phone every few minutes. "Okay, Grandma, what do you want to talk about?" she asked, with all the enthusiasm of someone getting a root canal. I decided to take a different approach with Emma. I pulled out a box of letters that Harold had written to me during his 2 tours in Vietnam. I'd never shown these to anyone, not even my own children. They were deeply personal, full of his fears and hopes and dreams for our future together. As I started reading them aloud, I watched Emma's expression change, her arms uncrossed. Her phone went face down on the table. By the time I finished the 3rd letter, she had tears in her eyes. "Grandpa wrote these?" she whispered. I nodded, but he was so quiet. He never talked about the war. That's when I explained to Emma that the quietest people often have the most to say. They just need the right person to listen. We spent the next 4 hours going through Harold's letters, and Emma started sharing things about her own life that she'd never told anyone. Her struggles with anxiety, her fears about the future, her complicated relationship with her parents. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. About 6 weeks into this arrangement, when I'd been having regular visits with Tyler, Emma, and 2 other grandchildren, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for a dinner I was cooking with Jake, when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I was in the cereal aisle when I heard familiar voices from the next aisle over. It was Tyler and Emma talking to their cousin Michael. "God, it's such a pain having to spend all this time with Grandma," Tyler was saying. "But think about it, we're getting paid like $100 an hour to listen to her old stories. It's the easiest money we'll ever make." Emma laughed. "I know, right? She's so desperate for attention. She's literally paying us to pretend we care. It's kind of sad, actually. But hey, I'll be debt-free by Christmas, so I'm not complaining." Michael chimed in. "My mom said Grandma's loaded. Like seriously loaded. If we play this right, we could all walk away with enough money to set us up for years. We just have to keep pretending we're interested in her boring stories about Grandpa and the good old days." If you've ever had your heart completely shattered by people you love, you know the feeling I had in that moment. It wasn't just disappointment or sadness. It was a physical pain in my chest, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. Here I was, thinking I'd been building real relationships with my grandchildren, thinking they were finally seeing me as a person worth knowing, and they were literally being paid to tolerate me. I stood there in that grocery store aisle, holding a box of Harold's favorite cereal, and I cried. Not just a few tears, but the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that come from a place of profound grief. I grieved for the relationships I thought I was building. I grieved for the loneliness that was apparently so pathetic that my own grandchildren were mocking it. I grieved for Harold, who would have known exactly what to do in this situation. But then, as I stood there crying over a box of Cheerios, something shifted inside me. The grief transformed into something else: determination. If my grandchildren wanted to play games with Grandma's money, then Grandma was going to change the rules of the game. I went home and called each of them. I told them I wanted to accelerate our arrangement. Instead of spreading out the time over months, I wanted to have a big family weekend where they could all earn their money at once. I was planning something special, I said, a celebration of family and a tribute to Harold. They were all invited to spend the entire weekend at my house, and I'd calculate their hours and write their checks on Sunday night. They were thrilled. Tyler said, "Grandma, that's such a great idea. We can all hang out together and really make it a family event." Emma added, "I can't wait, Grandma. It'll be like the old days when we were kids." The enthusiasm in their voices might have been genuine if I didn't know they were just excited about getting their money faster. That weekend, I pulled out all the stops. I cooked Harold's favorite meals. I prepared activities I thought they'd enjoy. I even hired a photographer to take family pictures. On the surface, everything looked perfect. We laughed, we shared stories, we played games. If someone had been watching from the outside, they would have seen a loving grandmother surrounded by devoted grandchildren, everyone having the time of their lives. But I was watching more carefully now. I noticed Tyler checking his phone constantly, calculating hours. I saw Emma exchange eye rolls with Michael when I started telling a story about Harold's time in the military. I caught Jake whispering to Sarah about how much longer they had to perform before they could get their money. Sunday evening came, and they all gathered in my living room, practically vibrating with excitement. I had 7 envelopes on the coffee table, each one with a grandchild's name written in my careful handwriting. They were trying to play it cool, but I could see the anticipation in their eyes. All that money, just sitting there waiting for them. "Before I give you these," I said, settling into Harold's old armchair, "I want to tell you all something important. This weekend has been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I've felt more connected to each of you than I have in years. The conversations we've had, the memories we've shared, the time we've spent together, it's been exactly what I hoped for when I made you this offer." They were all nodding enthusiastically. Tyler said, "Grandma, this has been amazing. I feel like I know you and Grandpa in a completely different way now." Emma added, "I'm so glad we did this. I had no idea how much I was missing by not spending time with you." I smiled at them, these beautiful young people who shared Harold's eyes and my stubborn chin. "I'm so happy to hear you say that," I said, picking up the first envelope, "because it makes what I'm about to tell you a little easier. I opened Tyler's envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Not a check. A letter. "Tyler," I read aloud, "thank you for the 23 hours you spent with me this month. I've calculated your time at exactly $100 per hour, which means you've earned $2,300. However, I've also calculated the cost of your portion of all the meals I cooked for you, the activities I planned, the gas money for the times I picked you up, and the emotional labor of listening to you complain about having to spend time with your pathetic, attention-seeking grandmother. Your total bill comes to $2,400. You owe me $100. The room went completely silent. Tyler's face went white, then red, then white again. "Grandma, what? I don't understand." I opened Emma's envelope next. "Emma, you spent 27 hours with me, earning $2,700. But you also cost me $2,900 in expenses and emotional damages for the eye-rolling, phone-checking, and general attitude of someone being tortured against their will. You owe me $200. One by one, I opened each envelope. Every single grandchild had racked up bills that exceeded their earnings. Michael owed me $300. Jake owed me $150. Sarah owed me $400. Every last one of them was in debt to me. "I heard you," I said quietly. "At the grocery store 6 weeks ago. I heard every word you said about how pathetic I am, how easy it is to take advantage of my loneliness, how you were just pretending to care about me for the money. I heard Tyler call my stories boring. I heard Emma call me desperate. I heard Michael talk about playing me like a game." The silence in that room was deafening. A few of them tried to stammer out excuses, but I held up my hand. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You have 2 choices. Choice 1, you can pay me the money you owe me, and we can pretend this whole thing never happened. We'll go back to the way things were before, where you ignore me unless you need something, and I'll go back to being the lonely old woman who talks to pictures of her dead husband." I paused, looking at each of their faces. Some looked angry, some looked ashamed, some just looked shocked. "Choice 2, I said. "You can earn your way out of debt the same way you earned your way into it. 1 hour of genuine time for every dollar you owe me. But this time, I'll know if you're faking it. This time, I'll be watching for real connection, real conversation, real care. Not the performance you've been giving me, but actual relationship." Tyler was the first to speak. "Grandma, we didn't mean—" But I cut him off. "Yes, you did mean it. You meant every word. And that's okay. I understand now that I can't buy love, I can't purchase respect, and I can't force people to care about me just because we share DNA. But I also understand something else. I understand that I have value beyond my bank account. I have stories worth telling, wisdom worth sharing, and love worth giving. If you don't see that value, that's your loss, not mine." Here's where I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between being taken advantage of and standing up for yourself? It's not easy, is it? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. Instead of anger or defensiveness, Jake, my 18-year-old grandson, started crying. Not just a few tears, but real, honest-to-goodness sobs. "Grandma," he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to go along with it, but everyone else was doing it, and I needed the money so badly, and I thought it wouldn't hurt you if you didn't know." Then Emma started crying. Then Sarah. One by one, they broke down, and the truth came pouring out. The pressure they felt from their parents to take advantage of Grandma's generosity, the way they'd been taught to see me as a resource rather than a person, the guilt they'd been carrying about abandoning me after Harold died, and how they'd convinced themselves that taking my money was somehow making up for their neglect. Tyler, who had seemed the most calculating of all of them, looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Grandma, I don't want your money. I want my grandmother back. I want the woman who used to let me help her bake cookies and told me stories about pirates and princesses. I want the grandmother who taught me how to plant tomatoes and never made me feel stupid for asking questions. I'm sorry I lost sight of who you really are." Now, I could have stuck to my guns. I could have made them work off their debts or sent them packing. But you know what I realized in that moment? They weren't the only ones who had lost sight of what was important. I had too. I'd become so focused on demanding their time and attention that I'd forgotten how to simply love them without conditions. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, getting up and walking to my desk. I pulled out my checkbook and started writing. "I'm going to give each of you exactly what you originally asked for. Not because you've earned it, and not because you deserve it, but because I love you, because you're my grandchildren, and sometimes love means giving without expecting anything in return." I handed Tyler his check for $15,000. I gave Emma her $25,000 for student loans. One by one, I gave them exactly what they'd asked for, no strings attached. "But," I said, and they all looked up at me with those beautiful, tear-stained faces, "I want you to understand something. This money comes with no obligation to spend time with me. No guilt, no expectations, no requirements. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be because you genuinely want one, not because you feel like you owe me something." What happened over the next few months was something I never could have predicted. Instead of taking the money and disappearing again, my grandchildren started showing up. Not because they had to, not because they were earning something, but because they wanted to. Tyler came over the following Saturday, not with a calculation of hours in his head, but with genuine curiosity about Harold's military service. Emma called me on Tuesday just to chat about her day. Jake started stopping by after school, not for money or food, but just to hang out with his grandmother. But the real transformation happened with Michael, the grandson who had been the most cynical about the whole arrangement. 3 weeks after our confrontation, he showed up at my door at 11 o'clock at night, crying so hard he could barely speak. He'd gotten into some trouble, made some bad choices, and instead of calling his parents or his friends, he'd driven straight to my house. "Grandma," he said, "I need help, but not money help. I need someone who will tell me the truth about how badly I've screwed up my life." We sat at my kitchen table until 4 in the morning, talking about mistakes and forgiveness and second chances. I told him about some of Harold's struggles, about times in our marriage when we'd almost given up on each other, about how people can change if they really want to. By the time the sun came up, Michael had a plan for getting his life back on track, and I had my grandson back. 6 months later, I got a call that changed everything. It was from a lawyer telling me that Harold's old business partner had found some investments we'd forgotten about. Apparently, Harold had been even better with money than we'd realized. My net worth had just jumped to over $4 million. My first thought wasn't about what I could buy or where I could travel. My first thought was about my grandchildren and how this news would test everything we'd rebuilt together. Would they see dollar signs again? Would we go back to the fake relationships and calculated time? I decided to tell them about the money, but with a twist. I called a family meeting and explained the situation. Then I told them about my new plan. I was going to give away most of the money. Not to them, but to charities, to scholarships, to causes that Harold and I had cared about. I'd keep enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, but the rest was going to help people who really needed it. "But," I said, looking around the room at their faces, "I want you all to help me decide where it goes. I want us to research charities together, visit organizations, really understand how we can make the biggest impact. It'll take time, lots of time, working together as a family. Are you interested?" Every single one of them said yes. Not because they were getting money out of it, but because they'd learned something about the value of being part of something bigger than themselves. Over the next year, we gave away $3.5 million. We funded scholarships for military families. We supported programs for lonely seniors. We helped start a community garden in Harold's honor. But more than that, we became a real family. We had Sunday dinners every week. We celebrated birthdays and holidays together. We supported each other through breakups and job changes and all the messy, wonderful parts of life. And you know what the most amazing part is? I'm not lonely anymore. Not because I bought their love or demanded their time, but because I learned how to love them without conditions, and they learned how to see me as more than just their grandmother's wallet. If you're dealing with family members who only seem to care about what you can give them, I want you to remember this. You can't buy genuine love, but you also can't let people take advantage of your loneliness. Set boundaries, stand up for yourself, but always leave room for real change and real growth. People can surprise you, sometimes in the most beautiful ways. Harold always used to say that the best investments aren't the ones that make you money, they're the ones that make you rich in the things that really matter. It took losing him and almost losing my grandchildren to understand what he meant. But now I know, and I'm richer than I ever imagined possible. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, or if you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you think someone else might need to hear this story, please share it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that love is the only currency that really matters in the end.